Good evening, everybody in my part of the world, in the African continent era. Not era, of course. African continent part of the world. Good morning to those of you who are listening to me, and it's morning for those, especially those in New Zealand. And good afternoon for some of you who, of course, are currently sitting in a country where it is afternoon. Welcome to the Network Migration Services webinar on Australia and New Zealand. For those of you who don't know, we actually conduct these webinars every 3 weeks. We try and keep you up to date with current changes and policies that are potentially happening for both countries. To introduce myself, my name is Andrew Kerr. I'm a licensed advisor for Australia and also New Zealand. You'll see my MARA registration for Australia on the first slide there, and my IAA registration for New Zealand also on the first slide. I'm the principal and owner of Network Migration Services and have been so for 30 years this month. And in fact, I've lived in South Africa for 30 years this month. So it's a little bit of a milestone for me. And I'm extremely proud to be associated and be involved with Network Migration in the last 30 years. Just a couple of thank yous before we sort of jump into this. I'm pretty direct. I'm a Kiwi. I'm a New Zealander. I lived in Australia for 10 years prior to coming to South Africa, and I have been, as I've just told you, in South Africa for 30 years now. I'd just like to say thank you again to Ruan Lowe, who organises our webinars for us. Ruan is head of our marketing. So thanks so much, Ruan, for organising tonight, as always. I wanted to welcome Liz. Also, thank you very much, Liz, for joining us this evening. Liz is not only our HR manager, but works out of our Joburg office and is one of our senior consultants, and is in the process of also getting her license in the next couple of years. Welcome to Peter. Good morning to you, Peter. Peter Lemmer is our New Zealand MD. Peter is South African. He's been in New Zealand somewhere between 6 and 7 years. I always get it wrong now. And Peter will be having a quick chat with you in 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so, just to introduce the job search process, which basically he's developed pretty much on his own in the past sort of 7 odd years. And it's been refined to the point where it's extremely good. In fact, we know it's good because we get clients that are using other agents come to Peter specifically just for the job search training. Good morning to you, Miss Linda Q. Nice to see you. Desiree is our operations manager, and Desiree is also in New Zealand, and Desiree's been there, gosh, about a month now, I think. Desiree decided to immigrate with her husband and her children. And thank you both for getting up so early in the morning, because I know daylight savings finished over there at 6 a.m. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us as always. It's been a hell of a day for us over here. We're back to stage 6 load shedding. For those of you who don't know what load shedding is, just Google it. It's basically where our power giant Eskom, and that's I think, is there such a word as an oxymoron? I must look that up. Anyway, so our power giant Eskom decides, of course, that they don't have enough power to go around. So they shut down cities and suburbs for anywhere between 2 hours to 8 hours a day. We've been notified today that we've gone to stage 6 load shedding, which effectively means tomorrow most regions of South Africa will be without power for 8 hours, broken down, but without power, which is really, really hurting our economy over here, as no doubt everybody that lives in Africa knows about it. We've only been load shedding since 2008, so it's only like, 15 odd years now, and with no disrespect to, of course, political ties and comments, I'm not going to get too much into it, but you know, hopefully, of course, we try and fix this problem, which is not going to happen quickly. It's probably going to be fixed over the next 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10 years. But I'll leave that up to our South African government to discuss with the powers that be over here and try and sort this problem out. Just a general thank you to our service providers. You'll see some of them on the first page there. These are providers. We don't like to think of ourselves as the one-stop shop. We are the one-stop shop. We have very competent competitors out there that all have their own business models, but most of the business models that, with respect, our competitors have don't offer the sorts of services that we do. Whereas, of course, we literally do everything from holding your hand through the entire process until you're residents of the country of choice. And whether that's, you know, shipping an animal or booking a plane ticket or selling a car or sitting an English test or opening a bank account or shifting funds or you know, wanting advice on things like mortgages and what to do with things like KiwiSavers, et cetera, this is what we're here for. We're not just paperwork. Clearly, a paperwork is an essential part of our services. And thankfully, we have an outstanding team. I'm actually sitting in our office right now. I'm lucky enough to live about 5 minutes from the office, so I come to the office to do the webinars. My team isn't in the office, clearly, but we have about 25 team members now across the world. One in the UK, a few remotely in South Africa, and of course a team now of a minimum of 4 people in New Zealand. So we're very proud of our team. We're very proud of our services and proud of the comments that we get. Because frankly, guys, we're in the process of changing your lives and trying to make that as smooth as possible. You'll notice I'm also a member of the New Zealand Association for Migration Investment and the Migration Institute of Australia. They are bodies that we're members of because they assist with information we maintain memberships every year, but they assist us with updated information most of the time. Just harping on the first slide with the MARA and the IA registration, please make sure you're going to deal with an immigration advisor that is registered. For New Zealand, whether you're onshore or offshore, you must be registered. For Australia, if you're onshore in Australia, you have to legally be registered. If you're offshore, you actually don't. I am, but you don't have to be. So just be a little careful. You want to be, especially at an initial consultation, when you're finding out about this process, you want to get the information from people who supposedly know what they're talking about. And MARA and IAA require us to register every year. So we have to do continuing professional development every year, and we have to maintain our licensing every year. And let's not pull any punches here. This is extremely strict. They are very, very strict because it protects you as the consumer about getting, one, the wrong advice, and two, paying an organization for procedures and processes that, quite frankly, they just don't deliver. So just make sure you get advice initially anyway from a registered advisor. I'm in the process of getting a few of my team registered in the next few years, only because I'm slightly mature now, as you'll see from the little slightly grey beard. And sometime in the next 4 or 5 years, I'm going to take a step backwards and allow my team to sort of take over the growth of network migration. We're extremely proud of the fact that over the past 30 odd years, we've immigrated close on 15,000 families. In fact, it's probably over 15,000 families now to these countries. And we wouldn't take you on as a candidate or a client unless you literally had virtually 100% chance of success. Now, clearly, that means you're going to have to come to the party on a few issues regarding, of course, processes and procedures. But we're not in the business of taking funds off people and not succeeding. And in fact, our success rate is as close to 100% as you can possibly be. Over the many, many years, it's over 99%. So please be assured that if you decide to take this journey with us, we will be fully transparent initially. Today, I'm going to explain pretty much as much as I can in the next 45 minutes to you about these processes. But I strongly suggest you have a one-on-one consultation with me. They are free. They don't cost anything. So what I would normally do is require your basic information. Thank you, Rowan, earlier for putting up my email address. Liz, or you might just want to type it in again quickly. It's andrew@networkmigration.com. That is me. It comes directly to me, and I handle my own inbox. And clearly, what I would require from you if you want to be assessed is a pretty basic CV. I don't care what it looks like at the moment, but I do need to understand the structures of your family and your respective ages of your family, please, in order to assess you and give you the accurate advice. So if you want a free assessment, just drop me the CV. If you're in a relationship, drop me both CVs if you can, yours and your spouse's. And then maybe just in a one-liner, I'm 42, my spouse is 39, and we have 3 children of 12, 10, and 2. So just give me the idea of the structure of your family. I don't need you to change your CVs to put your ages on them, because most modern CVs don't have ages on them for obvious reasons. But just please try and remember to give me the structures of your family and your ages and the country of choice that you're looking at, because you might actually qualify for both, but they are extremely different processes to get into Australia and or New Zealand, which of course I will then email you back the processes and the procedures with all of the costs and the timeframes. And then if you want to have a one-on-one with me, I consult Mondays to Saturdays. The one-on-ones, as I said, are completely free. So you can get completely free information off us. and then decide what you want to do with it. Either use us, use another agent, or of course move forward and do this yourself. If you want to contact, thank you, Liz. If you want to contact Peter, all our emails are our first name. So it's really quite simple, at networkmigration.com. And Peter's going to explain the job search process in about 10 minutes for New Zealand and Australia. And if you want to email Peter directly, clearly his emails are peter@networkmigration.com. Peter is Afrikaans background, so it's normally P-I-E-T-E-R. But because in New Zealand, that's extremely rare to spell Peter that way, we've just reverted to the Kiwi Peter, which is P-E-T-E-R @networkmigration.com. And he'll touch base with you in just a second. So I'm going to introduce him in a minute. But the first country I'm going to talk about, well, let me just start the slides. About Network, well, I've told you, we've been around 30-odd years. We've done 15,000-odd families. We are quite literally the one-stop shop. I'm going to do Australia, visa and points now, and then I'm going to do New Zealand. Australia's really quick. It takes 5 to 8 minutes. The reason is, well, you'll hear of the reason in just a second. We've already discussed our relocation and partners. When you get an email from me with your pathways, you will get an email from Rose Nightingale, who runs our relocation division, and that's the assistance with things like pets and furniture and opening accounts and flights and meeting at airports and accommodation and shifting funds, etc., etc. So you'll actually get 2 emails. So anything to do with the migration aspect, you must deal with me because I'm the licensed agent. As Rose isn't licensed, she's not allowed to give you immigration advice. She can give you relocation advice, but not immigration advice. And then we're going to just have a few question and answers in the end. Okay. If you want to type a question, please type it into the chat room. Desiree or Liz or Peter will answer that question. Clearly, if it's migration advice, they'll be telling you to contact me. But if it's just a general question, of course, they can answer it themselves. Okay, we've discussed that. That's me a couple of years ago. Right, Australia we're going to do first. Now, please, well, listen, guys, I lived in Australia. I loved Australia. It's a fantastic country. It's huge. It's one of the biggest land masses countries in the world. Of course, there are 6 or 7 major cities in Australia that are completely different from each other. I mean, Sydney is unlike Melbourne, which is unlike Sydney, unlike Brisbane, Adelaide, Darwin, etc., etc. Very beautiful country. Australia takes about 155,000 immigrants a year. Okay. So I'm going to tonight talk mainly about skilled migrant categories. There is not a visa that we cannot assist you with, be it student, family, business, work, spousal, grandparent, parent, short-term visas for study. Well, I've already said student, of course, etc., etc. So please, if you have a question on another type of visa other than what we commonly call a skilled visa, then just ask me. You might say, well, listen, I was born in Australia and I'm now married to South African woman, and how do I get my spouse into New Zealand with my current children, etc., etc. So just ask me in an email to me. Yeah, you might have bad network wherever you are, Tasneem, mainly because, of course, we're load shedding. Well, not we are, but South Africa went into load shedding about 13 minutes ago in certain areas. And clearly, if you're load shedding, it's going to be a problem. You will, of course, thank you, Ruan, for commenting on that. I'll leave it and not look at the question. So there's not a visa on the planet we can't do. I want you to take a screenshot of these points. I'm not going to go through them in too much detail. Please take a screenshot of that page or a photo from your phone or whatever. I will explain Australia. There are basically, on a skilled application, 3 types of visas you can apply for. One is called the subclass 189, where your occupation must be on the medium and long-term strategic skills shortage list for Australia. If it's not, then you cannot lodge a subclass 189 because you don't have a pathway. All right. There is a visa called the 190, which is state nominated. There are 8 states and territories in Australia, and they all have their own separate occupations lists. And you might have an opportunity to use one of those states to get in because your occupation and skill is on their list. And then there's a new visa that came out in 2019, just before COVID hit in 2020. And that visa was called a subclass 491. And that is a visa that is issued to you for 5 years. And in that 5 years, you have a year to take the visa up. And for 3 years consecutively, the main applicant must earn $53,900, which is easy. That's a low income in Australia. But on that specific visa, you cannot live or work in Sydney, Brisbane, or Melbourne for those 3 years. So on a 189, you can live anywhere. I call it the blue chip visa. Live where you want, do what you want. On a 190, you're signing a declaration that says you're happy to live and work in the sponsoring state for a period of 2 years. And then on a, please take another screenshot of that page, and I'll go back to the other page in just a second. And on a 491, of course, as I've just mentioned, you cannot live or work in Sydney, Brisbane, or Melbourne metropolitan area. Okay, so let's just go back to this slide, only because I wanted to point out in the age indicator for Australia, you can see the cutoff age to be selected for a skilled migrant application is 45 years old. So if you are already 45 or soon to turn it, excuse me, soon to turn 45, then get on with, well, if you're already 45, you can't get on with it, of course, because you won't be selected. You're not eligible the moment you turn 45 to be selected as the main applicant for Australia. You might have a younger spouse, for example, who qualifies. Well, that's okay. I mean, you might have a spouse who's 39 and you're 52. That's fine, as long as the spouse, of course, meets the relevant requirements. 99% of the time, you'll need a qualification to get into Australia. I mean that. There are over 30 assessing authorities in Australia, and pretty much all 30 of them, bar 2, require you to have a qualification. The Australian Computer Society doesn't necessarily require you to have a qualification, but you'd need extensive work experience, because you can't claim qualification points if you don't have it. You can claim work experience points, but not qualification points. And the other institution that might assess you positively is the, oh gosh, they used to be called AIM, and I forgot what they're called now. The Institute of Management, basically. And I don't know why I've got a mental blank on that name. Maybe Des or Liz, you want to just type that in. But yes, and a Computer Society and or the Australian Institute of Management, as it used to be called, we'll soon get the name here, will assess you on your work experience, but it has to be extremely solid and, of course, provable. You'll notice you get points for your work experience down here, and the work experience you're claiming must be related to your qualification. Thank you, Desiree. The Institute of Management and Leadership, they're now called. I just couldn't. Thank you, Desiree. And the work experience points have to be post your qualification if you've got one, clearly. You cannot count pre-qualification work experience for Australia. They won't recognise it. Thank you, Des. And then, of course, English. It's essential for Australia. You might be sitting in Ireland at the moment, or Canada or the USA, saying, hey, yippee, I'm exempt from the English test. I don't have to sit it. Well, that's true. You don't have to sit it, but if you don't sit it, you can't claim the points. And it's extremely likely that you would need the points in order to meet the required selection or lodgement mark. And then, of course, you can get bonus points down here, of course, if your spouse has a qualification and work experience that is on the same skills list as you. You can get 15 bonus points. Of course, if you're doing a 491 visa, you get 5 extra. On the next slide, I'll show you in a minute. If, on a 190 state nomination, you can get 5 extra bonus points if your spouse sits the English test and meets the relevant requirements. And there's your sponsorship on the 491 and the 190 there. And of course, if you qualified in Australia, you can also claim points. If you're a single applicant, believe it or not, and by single, I mean single, you don't have a spouse and children, you can get an extra 10 bonus points for that. And of course, as here, we've sort of doubled up here. If your spouse sits English or has the qualification that is on the same skills list as you. Now, one thing about Australia that just be careful of, you're seeing here the minimum points required is 65. Now, that's quite correct. You cannot load an application if you're not sitting on at least 65 points. But that doesn't mean you're going to be automatically selected, because in the past few years, the last 6 or 7 years, even pre-COVID, Australia selects the occupations they require, and they can fluctuate that selection mark. Giving you an example, the last selection on the on the 28th of February. Well, the selection was actually done in January, but they published their selections on the 28th of February. They selected management consultants, for example, with qualifications on 65. However, they selected accountants on 80. So just be careful. So what happens with Australia and New Zealand, by the way, is if you engage our services, we allocate you a team member to work with me on all of the application processes. And then, of course, Rose and Peter and the other team work on, job search, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you'll receive a starter pack from us. Now, the starter pack is clearly based on you and your skill sets and your family structure. And that starter pack is a detailed documentation checklist of what we want from you in order to submit the relevant documents at each stage of the application. So it's quite simple, the starter pack, although it's quite informative. And clearly, if you've got any questions on the starter pack, of course, you can contact me or contact your file manager, et cetera, for clarification purposes on documents. But then what happens is the documentation preparation for Australia and New Zealand would normally take somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks just to collect and prepare all the documentation we require from you in order to submit to the relevant authorities. And then once we're ready to submit, you're clearly notified by us and accounts, etc., and say, right, we're loading the application. Now, when you load an application for Australia, it doesn't cost anything. So we can load a 190 and a 189 and a 491 at the same time. We do 3 separate loadings of it. And the reason we would suggest loading at least the 189 and the 190 is because it opens up your options. And clearly, in some cases, you might only be on the subclass 491 skills list. And if that's the case, then we'd just be loading a 491. Now, when you load an application, you're loading it into a website. It's called Skills Select, Department of Home Affairs Skills Select. And if you're not selected, you can stay in that expressions of interest pool for up to 24 months. And after that, if you're not selected, you can, of course, if you're still eligible or think you're eligible, you can load it back in again. But quite frankly, if you're not going to be selected in 24 months, you're probably not going to be selected. So you might want to consider switching your application to New Zealand. But the process, of course, is loading the application, waiting to be selected. We're going to have an extremely good idea whether you're going to be selected or not before we load it. And then, of course, once we load it and you're selected, Australia then gives you a certain period of time to submit the relevant documentation. Because when you're loading an application, you're not loading documents. You're just loading, here I am, pick me. This is what I'm claiming for points. And of course, when they select you based on the information from the expressions of interest, then you've got to supply that information to them in order to prove everything. For example, birth certificates, marriage documents, qualification documents, work experience, English language proof, etc., etc. So once you're selected for Australia, if you're a teacher or a healthcare worker, you've just recently been put in priority selection, which means you'll be selected straight away. Australian federal government selects every quarter. They selected end of January, end of April, then end of July, then end of September. But the states get allocated a certain amount of positions by federal government. So the states can open or close at their leisure. And let's say, for example, Queensland federal government says, right, Queensland, you can have 10,000 applicants. Once they hit those 10,000, they'll close it. Giving you an example, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, Queensland opened its subclass 190 skills list at 8 o'clock in the morning. They shut it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's how many applications they had in 24 hours. So you have to be ready, especially if you're state nominated or sponsored, by the states, to actually get in, to be prepared and submit the application. Our team members monitor the states regularly, and clearly if you're in our system and you're a client and the state opens, we're going to let you know within 24 hours straight away, and your application should be ready to lodge, of course, and frankly, we would strongly suggest you lodged it. All right, so that's Australia. So you lodge, you load, you get selected. Your skills assessments need to be done, of course, and skills assessments take anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on who the skills assessing authority is. And once you're selected, you supply them with the information, and processing time from supplying the information would normally be between 3 to 6 months. So the Australian process will take, on average, somewhere between 9 to 15 months from the day you start, unless, of course, you're a teacher or a healthcare worker. And then you'd be selected pretty much straight away. So if you're a teacher or a healthcare worker, the process should take no longer than 3 to 6 months, quite frankly. Okay, so that's Australia. I'm not going to touch too much on it more tonight. So we're going to jump straight into New Zealand, land of the long white cloud, Aotearoa, my country, my homeland. My daughter's there already. My Sabrina, she's 24. And with no disrespect to my next comment, I don't think she'll ever come back and live in Africa. She's loving New Zealand. My son's just about to go. He's going to be joining her over there. He's just turned 19. Right. Yeah. Okay. So again, every type of visa, we don't need to harp on that again. Visitors visa for job search purposes. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a minute with Peter, but this is a critical visa because you will not get into New Zealand without a job offer on a skilled migrant category. You might say, well, listen, I'm on green list tier 1 now. Well, that doesn't matter. You still need a job offer. All right. So again, I'm going to talk about the visas for job search purposes in a minute, but I just want you to listen to something first while I invite Peter in. So please just have a listen to that. It's about a minute and a half long.
Where no New Zealanders are available for a job, employers can hire a skilled migrant worker using the Accredited Employer Work Visa, or AEWV. Before inviting a migrant to apply for an AEWV, employers must become accredited with Immigration New Zealand and complete a job check for the role they want to fill. This means migrant workers can have more confidence about the role they're coming to New Zealand for. To gain accreditation, an employer must be a genuine business in a good financial position and have no recent history of breaching employment or immigration law or business standards. The job check confirms that the job pays the market rate and the terms and conditions of the contract comply with New Zealand's employment standards. Before applying for a job check, employers need to advertise those roles to prove there are no New Zealand citizens or residents available for the job. After an employer's job check has been approved, you will be sent an email with a job check token. This means you can access the online portal and apply for your visa. The application process is all done online, where you will fill in your details and upload supporting documentation. Immigration New Zealand will check if you meet the requirements for the AEWV and that you have the skills and experience the employer is seeking. Once you are employed, your employer must provide you with information to help you settle into life in New Zealand and give you time to complete Employment New Zealand's online modules on employment rights while you are at work. The AEWV is designed to ensure only good employers can hire migrant workers and helps prevent migrant exploitation. More information about the AEWV is on our website.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, evening, Andrew. Morning, Jez.
back into non of course daylight saving. So thanks for getting up so early, mate. As always, guys, if you want to take a screenshot of this page, it was actually put out by ONZ a long time ago now, prior to them launching the AEWV. But Peter's going to explain what, as MD of Network in New Zealand and my business partner in New Zealand, he's going to explain what his and his team's roles are over there. And then we're just going to have a little bit of general discussion because I just want to ask you about, the job search visas at the moment, Peter, but I'll leave it up to you, mate. Fire away.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, we the team, we consist of 4 people, 2 here in New Zealand and 2 in South Africa, who deal with all things job search related and relocation related. So myself and Judy deal with all the job search training, which we do with you. I'll get to that now. And then relocation side, we send you a lot of information to do checklists before you leave South Africa, checklists when you land in New Zealand, what to do. And we teach you how to do it. And we have meetings with you before you depart for New Zealand. And we have meetings with you when you arrive in New Zealand, and preferably face-to-face, just to help you settle in easier and help to calm those nerves. But let's go through to the job search training. Our job search training consists of the 4 pillars of networking. And the 4 pillars consist of pillar 1, which is search engine optimizing your online profile. So we sit and we spend an hour or 2, I think at least, just optimizing that profile. The second pillar we go through is to connect you with people, and not just HR managers. We teach you at 5 different levels how to connect with people. The third pillar we go through then is how to market and brand yourself, and how to start networking within the New Zealand or Australian market, or any actually market in the world. It doesn't matter where. What we teach you, you can use in the future in life to actually just find jobs for yourselves. We're the only LIA company that actually does this, physically sits down with you and physically sits and trains you up on how to network. Others just say to you, well, come back when you've got a job offer, good luck, kind of thing. But we spend the time and effort to assist you. This training, this job search training, sorry, I forgot to get to the most important pillar, is the fourth pillar, which is the interview and culture training. An interview in New Zealand is totally different, 180 degrees different from an interview in South Africa. And you need to understand this walking into the interview. And you need to also understand how to get your value add across. In South Africa, you're taught a certain way to do it, and that way is totally wrong. And you'll be actually quite embarrassed when they say no to you. So you've got to learn how to convey your value add to New Zealanders, and also just to understand the culture. Why is that so different, the interview, and why is the culture different, and how to adapt into your work environment quicker and easier. It's very important just to understand this process. Otherwise, you're going to have a bit of a difficult time settling in. Now, all this job search training, we spend at least about 5 to 6 hours with you. Firstly, on videos. Because of load shedding, we converted the video. We went into videos because half my meetings never arrived because I didn't have electricity. So we've now put all the training onto videos. You watch it. Then I review it with you afterwards. I go through your training and we then optimize it. But we then sit with you and help you network. We've got some recruiters only in specific areas, not all areas, that we can introduce you to, that we've built relationships with over the last few years. And when you do Andrew's visa fees, all this job search training relocation is free. But if you don't want to pay all the fees initially, what you can do is sign up for the job search training portion only. And I will send you a separate quote for that. And if you then decide to continue with our visa fees, we subtract the portions that have been paid for the job search training off the visa fees. So you won't go and pay, Andrew's full fees, will be a reduced fee then. But you get then confidence that the process is working, that we know what we're doing. But just the success of this is unbelievable. I just see the clients who follow my process and the training that we do, Judy and I do, step by step, are successful, and are successful a lot quicker than the people who do not follow it step by step and who sort of I think I can do it on my own type of thing. It's amazing that the difference they get, the connections they get, how quickly they get approached for roles, or how successful they are. And there's some very hard to find jobs and people who just spent, and I just met a client yesterday who says, I made it my job to immigrate to New Zealand. He said, I made it my job to every day, 20, 30 minutes, to spend time on LinkedIn. And in this hard to find role in New Zealand, he actually just in 2 months got a job offer from overseas, which is really, really rare to happen. But if you take this seriously and you do every step of the way, as we say, your probability of being successful just escalates hugely. So yeah, we're here to assist. If you want a separate just job search training only quote initially, then email me at peter@networkmigration.com. I'll put it in the comments on the side.
Thanks, Peter. And just one thing that Liz and I were discussing today, we're just noticing, through COVID, clearly nobody flew, and the only people that were getting jobs were critical workers. But and then as of July or August last year, when the borders fully opened for New Zealand, a lot of companies were still quite happy to use technology, i.e. Zoom, Skype, Teams, whatever. But I'm noticing, and I'm not sure whether you're feeling the same way, that it's getting back to old school where, a lot of the companies are saying, yeah, no problem, but we're not going to interview the candidate unless they're in New Zealand.
Definitely. There was that flood between August September, October, November, December, January even. But
Yeah.
from February onwards, we're going back to the old culture of New Zealand, where they want to see you face to face. And I teach people your interview starts at the door, not in the boardroom. And there's certain reasons why they want to see. The most important part is your team fit in New Zealand. It's not your qualifications and your experience. It's about, are you going to blend in with the team in New Zealand? Now, just understand there's a statistic which people don't know, is that 97% of the number of businesses in New Zealand have less than 20 employees. So only 3% of companies have more than 20 employees. So you're going into a small team culture in the whole country. Also understand that we only have 5 million people in the whole of New Zealand. Johannesburg on its own in South Africa has 6 million people. So you're looking for work in half of Johannesburg. And it's a totally different mindset of job searching in South Africa versus how you approach it in New Zealand. So totally different process.
I mean, even in the emails you all get, ladies and gentlemen, we will be saying, and just a quick hello to Tia Marie. I didn't realize you're online, Tia Marie. Welcome. Tia Marie is also one of our senior consultants and also becoming licensed in the next 3 years. Hi, Tia Marie. But I just want to sort of say that there are 3 reasons this will fail, basically. You fail the medical. So clearly, if you've got a medical issue, you need to bring it up with me from the get-go. You fail the criminal record check. In other words, you've got reasonably major criminal record against you, but again, you need to tell me about it. And if your current spouse doesn't know you've got a criminal record, I still need to know. So you better tell me privately. And thirdly, because you don't get a job. So you've got to say to yourself, and 9 out of 10 people that fly to New Zealand, in fact, 95 out of 100, which is nearly 9 out of 10, that fly to New Zealand to get work, as long as they follow the correct procedures and do it the way that we believe, well, we know it works because we've been doing it now. Peter's been there 6.5 odd years now. If you follow the procedures and you fly into New Zealand, then you have a 95% chance of getting work. It's as simple as that. So you might say to yourself, well, I'm not prepared to fly. Well, if you're not prepared to fly, then I'm not going to take you on. I wouldn't take you on as a client. And I'm not saying, I wouldn't give you the advice. I will. But if you think about this process as the only reason this will fail is because you don't get a job and you're saying to yourself stubbornly, well, bugger this, I'm not going to fly there, then you're putting up a big barrier to entry. Even saying that, I mean, during the COVID crisis, and especially since March last year to January, Peter's training got over 200 of our clients job offers from offshore. So, I mean, well done to all of us and congratulations to the time and effort that we put into this, because we are the only organization, and I can say this factually, that puts this much time and effort into helping you find that all-important job offer. And as Peter's just mentioned casually, I mean, you're scheduled for 6 sessions with Peter and Judy at 45 minutes a session. Now, you might not need all 6, but you might need all 6 and more. So we are there to literally hold your hand through this entire process until you receive a job offer. But you've got to come to the party as the individual. You've got to say, well, what am I prepared to do in order to secure this all-important job offer? And, it's something that Peter's been refining for the last 6 odd years and will continue probably to refine for the next few years, because it's a constantly changing horizon. Or I think I'm right in saying all that, Peter.
Oh, definitely. I mean, technology, the online tools we use changing constantly. I'm learning new things every 6 months. There's something new that pops up, how the system works. And we keep abreast of all the latest technology changes, and we teach you those things. And those are little tricks and things which just help boost you exponentially on all these platforms.
Yeah, Boris. Okay, so Peter, I'm going to say thank you so much as always. You're probably making breakfast for all the kids who are still in bed or whatever. But love to the family, mate. And as you know, we're coming over July, August. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay, guys. I mean, we got about another 10 minutes, of talking before we finish this, and I'm going to get down into the nitty gritty. Boris, I just see you bring up a question. That depends on the structure of your family, and of course the the types of visas you're applying for. But ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have minimum $10,000 odd, then don't start this process. I mean, that's 100,000 odd rand. I mean, even without an agent, you're going to need that sort of money to be able to make sure that this is successful. This is not a cheap exercise. You are coming from, if you're coming from Africa, I mean, some of you might not be in Africa at the moment, of course, but if you're coming from Africa, you're coming from a rand-based economy most of the time, or a low, to a dollar-based economy. So this is an extremely expensive exercise. Yes, you can break payments down. Yes, you can pay some when you're overseas if necessary, et cetera, and we'll break those payments down for you when I send you. But it is not a cheap exercise, Boris. So you are looking at, as I said, if you don't have a minimum of $10,000 to throw at this, probably closer to 20, then I wouldn't start it. I really wouldn't. But depending, I mean, you might be a single individual, and then you'd be closer to the $10,000 as opposed to the $20,000, because at the moment the rand, for example, to the New Zealand dollar is 11.34. It's never in my entire career been that. And that's because we're now grey listed in South Africa. Of course, the rand is extremely weak against most currencies. Against the US, it's a crime. Anyway, let's not go there. So I'm just going to jump into sort of minimum requirements when it comes to finding work. So you've potentially got 4 residency pathways. So a work visa is not points tested. A work visa is based on you receiving a job offer from an accredited employer, and there's nearly 15,000 of those now, at a minimum salary in order for immigration to grant you the visa. And I'll show you the salaries in a second. But this is Green List Tier 1. There are currently just over 80 occupations on this list. And if you are on Green List Tier 1 and you have the relevant qualifications for Green List Tier 1, then you can bypass the work visa, which will save you money. You can go straight to residency from Green List Tier 1 within 8 weeks. You've still got to have the job offer. And clearly the relevant, if you're going Green List Tier 1, you'd need to sit the English test up front. You might need your skills assessed or not, just to meet the relevant requirements, etc. I'll explain all of this to you once you send me your CVs and we start liaising with each other. So from Green List Tier 1, though, and this has never happened before, you are able to go straight to residency within 8 weeks. Okay. So that's one way of getting in. These are occupations that were added to Green List Tier 1 as of the 15th of December. So hopefully you've taken photos or screenshots of that. Remember, you have to have the exact qualification, not only the job offer that meets your requirements, but the exact qualification that Green List Tier 1 requires. You've also got Green List Tier 2. Here are some of the occupations on Green List Tier 2. And on Green List Tier 2, it's what the previous government used to call the work to residence visa, where you are granted a 3-year work visa. In fact, when you get your work visas, 99 times out of 100, they're always valid for 3 years. Okay. And the main applicant gets the main work visa. The spouse at the moment, until the 31st of May, gets an open work visa, and he or she can pretty much do what they want. I'll talk about the change on the potential change on the 31st of May in a second. But then you've got a 3-year work visa on Green List Tier 2, and you work, for example, as a diesel mechanic for 2 years for the company you're working for, and after 2 years, you then lodge your residency application on Green List Tier 2. And here are some occupations that were added to Green List Tier 2 as of March this year. Okay. And then, of course, you've got income pathway, high income pathway. This is roles that are exempt from the medium wage. I'm sorry, I jumped before looking at the slide. So if you get a job offer at any of these roles at less than the current 2966 required, you will get a 2-year visa followed by an exit. You have to exit the country after 2 years if you haven't found a job offer that would meet, of course, either Green List Tier 1, Green List Tier 2, or skilled migrant category, which I'm going to show you now. Okay. Now, when it comes to your salaries, they are based on your occupations, and ANSCO stands for the Australia-New Zealand Standard Classification of your occupation. And ANSCO, if you get a job offer and your occupation is ANSCO skill level 1 to 3, you must be paid $29.66 per hour in order for the visa to be granted, and you have a pathway to residency from that visa. Okay. Yeah, Ruan, you might want to answer people that have whether things they might just want to reload here, and you're going to get the videos tomorrow, guys. So I'm sorry it's buffeting. I'm not, and hopefully half the country isn't, because we've got 250 people listening to me at the moment. So anyway, and then of course, if you're an ANSCO 4 or 5, it's extremely unlikely you'd get into New Zealand, because you'd have to be paid 45. Well, excuse me, that you'd have a residency pathway, because you've got to be paid, 44.50 odd an hour, which is 92,000. And an ANSCO 4 or 5 are generally lower skilled occupations. Now, and then you've got your high income, which is also a pathway to residency. So if you're offered double the minimum wage, which is double $29.66, which is $59.32. In other words, you're earning $123,000 a year. You get a 3-year visa, and after 2 years of earning that income, you can lodge your residency application. So you've got green list tier 1, green list tier 2, high income pathway, and then of course at the moment you've still got skilled migrant category. Now, skilled migrant points went up from 160 about a month ago to 180. And New Zealand selects from the skilled migrant category pool on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. So thank you. Okay. So, okay. Now, again, take a screenshot of this. You'll notice that you've got your work experience again here. While you're taking a screenshot of this, let me explain something to you. For Australia, I mentioned that 99% of the time you need a qualification. For New Zealand, you don't necessarily need a qualification, because INZ, Immigration New Zealand, will recognise your work experience in lieu of your qualification with most occupations. So you might be a motor mechanic we talked about earlier. You've been one for 15 years, but you never bothered to do a trade test 15 years ago. That's okay, because you can claim as long as you've got 3 years, because it's an occupational skill level 3. As long as you've got 3 years as a motor mechanic, you'll still be able, as long as you get a job as a motor mechanic, you'll still be able to probably have a residency pathway, even though you don't have the trade test. Okay. And clearly the work experience you're claiming here must be related to your job offer that you're receiving, and or of course your qualifications if you're claiming qualifications. You'll notice that you get points for areas of absolute skill shortage, and bonus points, of course, for work experience in those areas. Here's the kicker. You get 50 points if you get a job in Auckland, and if you're outside of Auckland, you can add another 30 points for that. If your job offers in area of absolute skill shortage, you can claim another 10. And if you're earning above the median wage, of course, or excuse me, double the median wage, you can claim an extra 20 points. Please take a photo of that slide as well. There are your points for your qualifications, remembering, of course, that you don't necessarily need one. You've got bonus points, clearly, if you've studied in New Zealand. When your partner gets employment, you can, as long as it meets the requirements. And I'll talk about that in just a second. You've got your age limit is 56 in New Zealand. So if up to and including the age of 55, then we will be able to, as long as you get a job offer, immigrate you. So if you've got no qualifications and you get in and you're not hitting the points, relevant points test at the time, you might say, well, okay, I'm going to go, but I might need to upgrade my qualifications through distance learning or night school or something whilst you're in New Zealand. Okay. So keep that in your mind, please. All right. But at the moment, the minimum selection mark is 180. And unlike Australia, which fluctuates, everybody on 180 and above will be selected. Okay. Right. Let's just come back a second. Sorry. This is our processes, if you like. It takes generally, as I said earlier, a couple of months to prepare all the documentation. But we don't wait those 2 months to hand you over to job search. We hand you over straight away. because the job search training is extensive and it takes a while. So while we're gathering your documents, Peter and Judy and the team will be job training you. As you can see here, stage 2, 3. That actually, I should change that. Please remind me, Rowan, to change that. We'll shift that job search training to my apologies, to over to stage 1. Thanks, Rowan. We must do that tomorrow for the next webinar. And then, of course, God willing, you do get a job while you're offshore, because clearly that's what we'll all be trying to help you do. And if you do, then we lodge the application. So what happens is when you accept a job offer from New Zealand, as you've seen this in that little talk that the New Zealand slide told you about, the company lodges the job token, applies for the job token. That on average takes 10 days. And then, of course, we then lodge your application to that job token, and the process takes a maximum 3 weeks. So from the job time you get the offer, you are looking at the process taking you plus minus 5 weeks until the visas are granted. Now, potentially on the 31st of May, the Right Honourable Michael Wood, the Minister of Immigration currently, is making changes to the spousal visa, where they're going to be granted an open-ended work visa from the 31st of May, but that doesn't quite mean what it says. Open work visa would normally mean you can go and work for anybody. Well, he is putting in a stipulation if he follows through. It's not confirmed he'll follow through yet. We'll know clearly on about the 1st of June, although he is giving a talk in New Zealand in the next week or so that my New Zealand team is attending, so maybe we'll find out sooner. But if he brings it in, it means that the spouse has an open-ended work visa, but they then, to be able to be eligible to claim residency from that, they would need to get a job with an accredited employer at a minimum of $29.66 an hour. I don't necessarily agree with these changes, but clearly I'm not a politician. And there is a general election in New Zealand in October this year, and it'll be extremely interesting to see whether Labour or National gets in. I've got my opinion on it. I'm not going to impart my opinion in an open forum like this. I know who I would like to get in, and I know the reasons why. And maybe in a private conversation I will have with you, I can tell you what those reasons are. But yeah, so listen, guys, I mean, that's pretty much it. We're nearly at 10 to 9 now. Please, ladies and gentlemen, whether you use us or not, quite frankly, is irrelevant. But we are, as I said earlier, completely transparent with this process. Everything I've just told you, you can find out for yourselves. You can log on to the internet and hunt around and find out. I'm going to make it a simplistic process for you on how to understand it. Some of my colleagues in the industry won't give you that information until you've paid them some money. Well, we don't do it that way. We give you all the information. Then we, of course, quote you on what you want us to do. Simple as that. So once again, I'd just like to say thank you to the team for being there with me, for me, as always. I'm every day I come to work, I'm incredibly proud of all of you. You make the work that I do really enjoyable most of the time. And the last thing I'd like to end on, ladies and gentlemen, is this is your life we're mucking around with here, and we take this extremely seriously. So clearly I shouldn't have used the word mucking around. We are this is your future for not only yourself, but clearly, your spouse and your children, if you're in that way. Or you might be a youngster, wanting, like my daughter, wanting to get out and, just go and, discover the world and start, making some money overseas and getting some overseas experience. Please be assured that if you do engage our services, we will be with you every step of the way, whether that takes 1 month or 10 years. We do not stop this process until you're living and working in your country of choice. So just once again, thank you, everybody, for joining me on the broadcast tonight. We will have another one in 3 weeks. But as the changes start happening with Australia and New Zealand, you're now on our mailing list. You will get mails. I must admit, done blogs in the last few weeks because we've just been so busy. And, of course, Easter, etc. And you can probably hear I've got this virus that's going around South Africa at the moment. So be careful, stay safe, stay healthy. And clearly, if you engage our services, everybody, we do look forward to working with you. And if you don't, we're still happy to give you advice. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe. God bless. And we look forward to engaging you in the future. Ciao.